Hey, as most of you are well aware, I'm a political junkie from way back. I've spent over 20 years of my life in the political arena at various levels, doing different jobs, everything from volunteering in the snowdrifts in the Midwest, to running a campaign at the state level, to getting a couple of presidents into the Oval Office. With the 20 years of experience that I've got, I have had unbelievable opportunities and amazing access to some of our well-known politicians, I'll say. Another thing that comes with over 2 decades of political involvement is the fact that I've been exposed to an unbelievable amount of political advertising. You cannot imagine how much advertising I've seen, some of it I've helped write over the years. I have learned in political advertising that it is designed to do 2 things. First is to get your attention. Number 2, to get a response from you. Whether that's positive or negative, the ultimate goal is to get a response. Keeps it on the tip of your tongue. I've never really, responded to much political advertising in the past, primarily because I work so closely with it, kind of become numb to it and things like that. However, Rick Perry's most recent television ad is running right now in Iowa and New Hampshire in front of the First in the Nation caucus in Iowa and the First in the Nation primary in New Hampshire, has definitely got my attention and definitely warrants a response from me. At least I think so. What I'm going to do is break this little 28-second commercial down line by line and address each line that Mr. Perry let leave his mouth. The first thing he says, and I quote, "I'm not ashamed to be a Christian," unquote. Mr. Perry, has anyone ever in your lifetime in this country asked you to deny your religion or your faith? Have you ever been put in a position where you had to say that you weren't a Christian or that you wouldn't get something if you were? Have you ever felt it necessary to deny your belief to anybody, anywhere in your political career? If so, please tell me where it was and who did this to you. Who made you feel that insecure about your faith or religion that you feel it necessary to say that you're not embarrassed or ashamed of being a Christian today? The next line in his commercial, which began airing earlier this week, is, quote, "But you don't need to be in a pew every Sunday to realize that there is something wrong in our country when gays can openly serve in the military, but children cannot celebrate Christmas or pray in schools," unquote. I will begin this one with the fact that the issue of gays in the military has never been about religion. You can go back through all of the papers issued by the Pentagon and the memos exchanged back and forth between the Pentagon, the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, Department of Justice, and the White House over the last 50 years or so in relation to gays in the military. Not one time you'll find a referral to religion. Now, with that said, I'm going to kind of leave that alone and fast forward to Christmas and prayer in school. After a little research into some of Mr. Perry's prior comments related to school prayer and religion in general, it is very clear that he either strongly objects or simply doesn't get the doctrine of separation of church and state. Yeah, it exists in our country for very good reason. Mr. Perry actually issued a challenge several years ago asking anyone to show him anywhere that indicated our founding fathers intended that there to be a separation between religion and government in the United States. I'm guessing that Mr. Perry was not paying attention to American history when the subject of the creation of our nation was actually dealt with. If you recall your early American history, pre-revolution specifically, you'll remember that one thing we were preparing to revolt about was the fact that there was and remains a national church in England. Yes, there were many other reasons that led to our break, from King George's England, but religious freedom was paramount to that separation. Thomas Jefferson, 3rd president of our nation and primary writer of the Declaration of Independence, made very clear the intent of the founding fathers. The actual phrase, separation of church and state, is derived from a letter that Jefferson wrote in 1802. That letter says in relevant part, quote, "Believing with you that religion is a matter which lies solely between man and his God, that he owes account to none other for his faith or his worship, that the legitimate powers of government reach actions only and not opinions. I contemplate with sovereign reverence that the act of the whole American people which declared that their legislature should, quote, make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof," unquote, thus building a wall between church and state. And that is the quote from Mr. Jefferson's letter in 1802. Mr. Perry, your example of the intent of the Founding Fathers is now laid before your feet. Can you deny that there was no intent of our forefathers to separate church and state, to keep them very separate, but both very relevant to us as a nation? I find it necessary to point out that the first time this separation issue rounded itself through our federal judicial system was in 1847. Specifically in Everson v. Board of Education, the United States Supreme Court, in a very rare unanimous decision, stated, "There is a wall of separation between church and state." Since that ruling, many others have followed. The most interesting thing that I discovered during my research for this little project of mine today is that the separation doctrine received the most attention and the most strengthening when Chief Justice Rehnquist was sitting on the Supreme Court. It was under his court that the very distinct black-white line has been drawn and strengthened between church and state. It's interesting because the Rehnquist court was one of the most conservative Republican courts in our nation's history. The next line in Mr. Perry's commercial is the one that truly, truly got to me. He said, quote, "As president, I will end Obama's war on religion, and I'll fight against deliberate attacks on our religious heritage." This single sentence in the commercial is what grabbed my attention and brought me to my feet from my dining room table, yelling at the television. Those of you who know me know that I don't normally watch television a lot. It's kind of in the background when I'm working and things. But this brought me to my feet 2 rooms away. It wasn't the line about gays in the military or prayer in school or not being able to celebrate Christmas. It was Obama's war on religion. Mr. Perry, as a public figure, I would expect something better than this attack coming from you. What war on religion has Mr. Obama initiated, ever? On your website and Facebook page, I've asked you to provide me with a single example of President Obama's religious war. Your response was to block me from both pages. I've reviewed every single presidential order, interview, weekly radio broadcast, and print media story that the president has participated in since his time in the Illinois Senate. I cannot find a single attack on any religion or religious belief or religious group ever having left his mouth. If in fact there were a war on religion taking place, I dare say that it is from your side of the fence, and your cohort's narrow definition and view of what religion is and is not, and what they find acceptable. It is disgraceful to me that any politician would level accusations against a rival that have absolutely no basis in fact. This is one of the reasons that so many Americans do not participate in the political process anymore. How sad is it that more Americans vote on Dancing with the Stars and American Idol than on our presidential elections? But who can really blame them when they have to separate fact from fiction, from the people who are supposed to be leading us? The last sentence in Mr. Perry's current commercial, quote, "Faith made America strong, and it can make her strong again," unquote. I don't think that America has lost her faith at all, nor has it been taken away from her. The strength of our nation comes from the people. What America has lost faith in is the political process because of the attacks and lies that we are forced to endure during these election cycles. While we demand truth in advertising in everything from our food and cars to our medicines and airplane tickets, why don't we expect more from our political candidates in their advertising? Shouldn't we expect more from them? After all, these are the men and women that lead our nation. As a matter of fact, I feel very strongly that all political advertising should be subjected to a very, very strict review and fact-checking process prior to being shot or aired over the airways of America, printed in the papers, or printed on postcards that find their ways to our mailbox. Level the playing field by requiring politicians to document their so-called facts and figures. We all know the statistics lie, but if you're going to come out and say that somebody is attacking religion in this nation, back it up with some facts. If you're going to come out and say that this process or that process isn't working, or this program fails or misses the mark, bring your numbers. Show us. Stop the silliness. It is time that America's faith in the political system and our government be